I've gotten a lot of comments as I've started my full-time indie game development journey asking me how I got so good at pixel art, which is a great compliment because I actually don't consider myself to be that great of a pixel artist. However, I did go from basically having no art skills to being able to produce decent and presentable pixel art. And I did that by learning a couple of very important rules and guidelines. And so in this video, I want to show you some of those rules and guidelines that I learned that can take you from having absolutely no art skill to being able to produce pixel art for your game that looks good. So let's get right into that. The program that I'm using here is Sprite, which I think is one of the best programs you can use to create pixel art. It's what I use to create pixel art for all of my games. However, the tips that I'm going to give you in this video are not Sprite specific. They're gonna work for any program that you use to do your pixel art. Okay, so tip 1 is start small. I'd recommend starting with a small canvas size when you're first starting to draw pixel art. Something like 16 by 16 or 32 by 32 is what I would recommend. There are some pixel artists that would say that smaller art is actually harder, and it can be in certain circumstances, but the point of starting small is to give yourself a big constraint. And the overarching theme of a lot of these tips is going to be that constraints breed creativity. The fewer options you have in terms of how to produce your art, the more you can focus in on the things that actually matter in terms of making the art look good. So when you start with a small canvas size, you're essentially going to be forced to work within the limited confines to produce good art that conveys the message or conveys the elements of the artwork that you're trying to convey in a proper manner. So instead of having a huge canvas where you can place as many pixels as you want and kind of get lost in the details, starting small allows you to think about each individual pixel and how it makes an impact on your overall artwork. So here in Sprite, I've actually got this canvas size is 48 by 48, but I've subdivided it with these blue squares into 16 by 16 squares. And so essentially I'm going to be using the 16 by 16 canvas for this video. The next tip is to use a limited color palette. I would recommend starting with a 1-bit color palette. So over here on the left-hand side, I've got black and white as my colors. If you start with this, again, constraints breed creativity. If you have only 2 colors with which you can make your art, you're basically going to have to focus on how to do the most with your limited tools. And this is actually going to draw out what's most important about the art and how you convey it to the viewer. It's going to force you to focus on the form. You're not going to have millions of colors to choose from. You're not going to have highlights and shadows to worry about. It's just going to be about, can you convey what you're trying to convey using only 2 colors? If you focus on that and you practice that, that is going to give you a very solid foundation on top of which you can build more complex things like shadows, highlights, colors, that sort of thing. So since it's almost Halloween, I'm going to go ahead and draw a jack-o'-lantern. I'm going to show you how I would approach that using a 1-bit color palette. Before we get into the next tip, I want to tell you about this video's sponsor, Clickup. Clickup is an app that gives you all the tools you need to manage your game development projects. You can create lists, which are essentially Kanban boards, to track and manage the tasks you need to do for your games. What makes ClickUp stand out from other task management software is that it has a high degree of customizability. You can add any columns you want to your lists, and you can even add custom fields to each task in the task list. Besides lists, ClickUp has a number of other useful features for game development. It offers a documentation feature, which allows you to write rich text documents, which is perfect for preparing Steam store page copy, writing game design documents, or even documenting your code. Additionally, ClickUp has a really useful forms feature, which is perfect for collecting feedback from your players. You can customize a form through the ClickUp interface to specify the data you want to collect. Then you can send this form link to your players. Every time one of your players submits the form data gets logged into a ticket in the associated list, making it super easy to triage the feedback you get. When working on development and ensuring you deliver a polished game, being organized is not just a nice to have, it's essential. Game development cycles can be long and complex, often spanning months or even years. You've got multiple moving parts like asset creation, coding, QA testing, localization, marketing plans, and platform-specific requirements. Missing one detail can delay your launch or even lead to costly errors during submission to platforms. That's why tracking every task and staying on top of deadlines is key to ensuring nothing falls through the cracks. With ClickUp, you can set up productivity boards and organize everything with calendar views all in one place. And by the way, Clickup is free, so go to tryclickup.co/firebelly to get started. Clickup gives you all the tools you need to effectively manage your game projects. Thanks to Clickup for sponsoring this video. Okay, after just a few minutes, I've got what I think is a perfectly decent jack-o'-lantern. Now, again, I'm not an artist. I'm showing you how you can become decent at pixel art with no art skills or no art background. And so me, being a non-artist, I think I've produced a pretty passable jack-o'-lantern. I'm just gonna mention a couple of the things here, the ways in which I've used the 1-bit color palette that you can pay attention to when you're attempting to draw your own things. So first, you cannot make sections of the black collide with each other. So I have to make sure that the mouth, for instance, is separate from the eyes, because if any of these black pixels touch, like so, I get a very muddy image that doesn't really convey the meaning that I'm trying to convey. And so you have to be very careful about where you put your black pixels. And you'll notice too that I can use the black to represent multiple things. So in the case of the eyes and the mouth, the black represents a lack of a pumpkin, right? It's the holes that have been carved into it. However, this line on the left-hand side here, this black here, that's not taken to mean a hole that's been carved in the pumpkin. I think that most people will look at this and understand that that's meant to indicate curvature. That's meant to indicate that there's a ridge or ridges, plural, along the pumpkin. Something as simple as that can make or break the impression that your viewer gets. If I were to fill that in, you know, this still looks like a pumpkin and this would definitely work, but that little extra detail, I think, just kind of puts it over the edge. And then for the stem, you can see how I've made the stem basically its own little floating island here. It's not connected to the base of the pumpkin. It's separated by this moat of black here. And I think that just adds a ton of depth. It looks in the small preview like the stem is going into the dip of the pumpkin, right? It looks like the pumpkin dips in and the stem goes into it. Now again, you can definitely connect it and that wouldn't necessarily be a problem, but these are just things that you can keep in mind. Like, you can experiment with it. There's multiple ways of doing this, and I would encourage you to experiment. The whole point of starting small and the whole point of starting with a limited color palette is to experiment with how to make the limited colors and the limited amount of pixels work in your favor. Once you've gotten comfortable with a 1-bit color palette, you can move on to a limited color palette that actually contains more than 2 colors. So for instance, you can go to this website LowSpec and browse any palettes you want here. I would recommend going from 1-bit to something like 8 or 16 colors. You still don't want to introduce too many colors at once. Again, we want to keep the constraints relatively tight so that you're learning within those confines. You're learning the fundamentals, because what those restrictions are going to do is they're really going to bring out the necessity of the fundamentals of drawing the forms well and making the most of your colors. You're not necessarily going to produce better art by having access to all of the millions of RGB colors. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to choose exact colors of 8, and I'm going to go ahead and find one that I like. I actually really like this Funky Future 8 one. I've used this in one of my previous games, Ace of Sphinx, and I think it's a really great example of how a limited color palette can go a long way. You can see even in this example image here, you can see that on this island, the goats are blue, right? And I want to mention that because we can make colors work in a lot more ways than we think we can. When you think goat, you don't think blue, you think white. And so if you were to draw on your own, you would probably immediately go to some kind of white color. But the interesting thing about this Funky Future 8 is that they're blue goats, and you can look at that and say, well, I know that they're goats. They look like goats, but they're blue. And so you can make colors that are usually nonsensical work when you're using a limited color palette for all kinds of different purposes. Okay, so I've loaded this Funky Future 8 into Sprite as a palette on the left-hand side here, and now I'm going to show you how I can color up the pumpkin using these limited colors. Okay, so using the Funky Future 8 palette, I've colored this up, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the choices I've made. So you'll notice that there's no green color in this Funky Future 8 palette. Now, if I was choosing my own colors, I'd be tempted to choose a green for the stem of the pumpkin. But because I don't have a green, I used this light blue instead. And what's interesting is that it doesn't look out of place at all. It's a blue stem. It's not something that you're ever going to really see in nature, and yet viewers are going to understand exactly what that is. That's the pumpkin stem. And then for the highlight, I've just gone ahead and used a yellow color, and for the shadows, I've used this pink. Now, the shadow is a little bit too light, but that actually leads into my next tip, which is to use appropriate contrast. One thing that a lot of new pixel artists do is that they will not have appropriate contrast between adjacent pixels. And so I think that right here, this orange and this pink, those contrast values are not high enough, such that as you were to zoom out on the preview, you actually kind of lose definition. The pink and the orange become not super distinguishable from each other. Now, because this is a well-designed color palette, I think you can definitely use orange and pink next to each other, but I'm just going to, for example purposes, choose a lighter pink here. So I've made it a little bit lighter, and you can definitely see now that as I zoom out, it all kind of blends into one color. If I zoom out enough, it actually just looks like orange. Now, you can easily tell the difference when you're super zoomed in, but players are most likely going to be seeing your art in this kind of size. And the problem is that it's either going to lose the detail that you think it has, or it's going to become muddy. And so what we can do about that is choose higher contrast colors. So I've put that pink back as it should be, but for the shadow, I think I'm going to choose the darker color here. And I'm just going to go ahead and draw that in. Now this is going to look really harsh close up, but as I zoom out, you can see that that actually doesn't look terrible. And if I wanted to, I could reduce some of the shadow on the bottom there, and I could even fade it out to a lighter color to make that transition a little bit less harsh there. And what we can see now is I've kept the lighter pink arches here to indicate the curvature of the pumpkin, but then I've made the part of the pumpkin that's in shadow this darker pink or purple color here. And this may not look entirely great when you're super zoomed in, but again, as you zoom out, that looks great actually. You can see a very clear contrast between what's in highlight, what's in shadow, and then the smaller details, the lighter details, are represented by a lighter color, which still has enough contrast to be noticeable without interfering with the other elements that you're trying to emphasize, like the eyes. If I were to make this dark color everywhere where the pink is, you can see that we kind of get, again, we get that muddiness because now there isn't enough contrast between the black and the purple, and then it kind of creates just a mess when you view it from a distance. So manage your contrast well. Pixels that are adjacent to each other should have plenty of contrast so that they stand out. Tip number 4 is hue shifting of shadows and highlights. So this is going to apply whether you're using a color palette or whether you're trying to choose your own colors. So I want to point out something that maybe you didn't really notice, which is that why are we using a purple color for a shadow when the pumpkin is orange? And furthermore, why are we using a yellow color for the highlight when the pumpkin is orange? What a lot of new pixel artists will do when they're trying to do highlights and shadows is that they will try to just choose a darker version of the base color and then a lighter version of the base color. So for instance, if I were to select this orange here, what that might look like is I might go into the HSV slider here and just turn down the value and then draw that as the shadow. For the highlight, I would do the same thing. Select the base color and then go ahead and down the saturation if I'm already at max value and just paint like that. So you end up with something like this. This is what a lot of new pixel artists do. And I really honestly don't think that this works. This makes your art look very bland. Now compare that to this, where the shadows are not a darker version of the orange. They're actually a different color entirely. And so, how do you choose the colors for your shadows and highlights? Well, if you're manually choosing your own colors, what you can do is hue shift. So we're gonna select this base orange here, and I'm gonna open up the HSV hue saturation value slider. And for the shadow, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna shift the hue toward purple. So I'm gonna shift my hue to the left toward purple. I'm gonna go even a little bit farther. And then I'm gonna turn the value down, darken that. And then if I go ahead and paint this now, I've got a pink now instead of an orange, but that looks better immediately. It looks so much richer. The art is popping much better. And likewise for the highlight, what I can do is select again my base color here, but instead of hue shifting towards purple, I wanna hue shift towards yellow now. So I'm gonna shift towards yellow, and you can play with the saturation and value sliders here, but I think just a hue shift works here. And now we get to yellow. And what you'll notice is that I'm actually closely matching the colors that were already available in my color palette. So just those minor changes to how you do your shadow and highlight colors makes a huge difference in how much your art pops. If you're not picking your own colors and you're sticking to a limited color palette, you can apply the same principle. Just look for a color in your palette that is shifted more towards purple for your shadow and a color that is shifted more towards yellow for your highlights. In other words, go for cooler colors for shadows and go for warmer colors for highlights. All right, and now I've got some tips for outlines, which are to avoid jaggies and to make your outlines pointy to emphasize pointiness. Now, what do I mean by that? Outlines are generally pretty straightforward. You take your dark black color, and you can also use a non-black color, and you simply just draw around. So here I am taking the pumpkin that we've drawn a couple of times now, and I'm just outlining it in black here, and we end up with something like that. But there are a couple of things that you want to keep in mind. First, avoid jaggies when you're drawing any sort of line, but especially outlines. And what a jaggy is it's essentially this kind of line where you've got a line like this, and then you've got a line like that, and then you've got a line like that. Do you see how there are doubled up pixels here? That just kind of looks awkward. Now you can definitely make a style work with this. However, you want to avoid that. You want to make it a nice, smooth step up without any pixels doubled up. So that's the first thing you should know about outlines. The second thing is, for something like this stem, I may want to emphasize that this stem is pointy, but the way that the outline currently is that it looks a little bit rounded. Now watch this. If I place a single pixel, now the stem looks pointy. So I've just placed a pixel up here in the top corner of the stem, and now the stem looks a lot sharper. Now this is especially useful when you're drawing things like swords and whatnot, because depending on how your outline is drawn, it can actually make the sword look blunt or rounded. Whereas if you just add that extra pixel to emphasize pointiness, that's actually going to make the sword look sharper. So this is kind of a violation of the jaggies rule because we're kind of doubling up pixels instead of having a nice uniform outline. But that is a trick that you can use to emphasize to the viewer that this is pointy. And then another thing about outlines is that you can also feel free to remove the bottom edge of the outline for things that are supposed to be sitting on the floor, because then that makes it look like the object is connected to the floor, and then the outline takes over to emphasize that it is elevated or it has some separation from the floor. So this is actually something that I'm doing in Gunforge. For any entity that is designed to be attached to the ground, I actually don't have a bottom outline. I just remove it like so. Okay, so to wrap up this video, I just want to recap the tips that I gave you. So tip number one, you want to start small. You want to use a 16 by 16 canvas or a 32 by 32 canvas. And the reason that you want to choose these sizes is because this is going to really force you to focus in on how to represent what you're trying to represent very clearly. This is going to allow you to focus on forms, the individual impact of a single pixel. You're not going to have as much room to go deep into the weeds on detail. You're really going to be, I think, focusing on the high level forms. Like, how do I make the viewer think I'm looking at a pumpkin with a very small canvas size? And it's going to take you a little bit of practice at first to figure out how to work with such a small canvas size. But Google is your friend. Go to Google Images or any other image board and just look at what other pixel artists are doing and learn from them. Study how they're placing their pixels, how they're making the most out of a 16 by 16 canvas size, and try to borrow that and use some of those learnings when you're practicing on your own. And again, you want to use limited color palettes. 1 bit to start, I would recommend, because then you can draw things like this jack-o'-lantern here and just keep drawing things of all different types. Draw flower pots, draw trees, draw swords. Whatever you want to draw, try to draw it using a 1-bit color palette on a 16 by 16 canvas. And it's going to take practice, but you're going to get the hang of it because the constraints are going to breed creativity. There's only a limited number of ways to make something look good in a 16 by 16 canvas with 2 colors. So keep trying until you get something that looks good. Okay, again, contrast. Make sure that you've got enough contrast between your pixels when you start using colors. So when you go into using limited color palettes of 8 and 16 and 32 colors, make sure that when you're putting pixels adjacent to each other, that there's enough contrast between them. And then if you're going to do shadows and highlights, hue shift the shadows and highlights. Highlights need to be shifted towards yellow and shadows need to be shifted towards purple. And of course with outlines, avoid jaggies. You can make an element of your art look pointier by creating a hard right angle like so. And you can remove the outline from the bottom of the entity if it's going to be connected to the floor. So again, these are some of the tips that I've picked up as a non-artist to become decent at pixel art. I think you'd agree that these are not the best pixel art jack-o'-lanterns that you've ever seen, but I think you'd also agree that each of these jack-o'-lanterns would not look out of place in a game with a similar theme. So I really hope that helps. I've got actually many more pixel art tips that I've learned, but this video has already gone long enough. So if you'd like to see a part 2 with some more pixel art tips, let me know and I will go ahead and produce that video. Otherwise, I hope you found it enjoyable. I hope you found it useful, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching this video. If you'd like to support my work, you can purchase one of my courses, you can wishlist my upcoming game Gunforged on Steam, and you can sign up for my email list at firebelly.com. The links for all of those things are in the description below.